The enforcement of laws is at the heart of corruption in Nigeria, and legal practitioners have the role of ensuring that regulatory behavior follows best global trends. That's the view of our guest, the chairman of the Nigerian Bar Association section on business law, Mr. Gbenga Oyebode, who believes that lawyers need to constantly engage their clients and regulatory agencies on the proper way of doing things. It's an interesting conversation, but just before we get to it, let's commence proceedings the usual way with a quick recap of the top stories from the courts. I'm Shola Soyele, and this is Law Weekly on Channels Television. We begin from the Supreme Court, which last week Friday laid to rest what some have described as the nation's longest-running election petition. It spanned from 2007 to 2013. In a unanimous judgment, the Apex Court dismissed an appeal instituted by the former governor of Ekiti State, Mr. Segun of the People's Democratic Party, PDP. The former governor had hoped to cash in on the crisis that rocked the nation's judiciary when the president of the Court of Appeal, Justice Ayo Salami, was suspended from office. He appealed to the Supreme Court, alleging likelihood of bias in the judgment of the Court of Appeal, which removed him from office. The Supreme Court has, however, agreed with Governor Kayode Fayemi and declined the attempt by the former governor to lure it to meddle into an appeal already concluded by the Court of Appeal, which was the final arbiter at the time the election was concluded. The court described the move as an attempt by the former governor to get back into the Ekiti State Government House. From the Supreme Court, we move to the Court of Appeal in another case, which is also arguably one of the longest-running criminal trials in the country. The judge of the Court of Appeal, Lagos, Justice Ibrahim Salawu, last week Monday withdrew from the panel hearing the appeal filed by Major Hamza Al-Mustafa, challenging the death penalty passed on him for the murder of the late Alhaja Kudirat Abiola. Justice Salawu, who headed the three-man appeal panel, cited personal reasons for his withdrawal from the case. The Lagos High Court on the 30th of January 2012 had sentenced Al-Mustafa, the former chief security officer to the late head of state, General Sani Abacha, and one Lateef Shofolahan to death for conspiracy and the murder of Kudirat. Last Monday's development in the appeal was a blow to the expectation of the parties who were in court for the definite hearing of the appeal. Hearing of the matter has now been pushed to the 10th of June. Staying at the Court of Appeal in Lagos, the 25 million naira compensation awarded to popular Yoruba actor and comedian Babatunde Omidina, popularly known as Baba Suwe, for his alleged wrongful detention by the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, NDLEA, in October 2011, has been reversed by the court. Justice Yetunde Idowu of the Lagos High Court Ikeja had on November 24, 2011 ordered the NDLEA to pay 25 million naira to Omidina and publicly apologized to him in conspicuous pages of two national dailies for violating his rights to personal liberty. However, in a unanimous judgment delivered by Justice Rita Pemu on Friday, the appellate court upheld the NDLEA's appeal against the judgment. The three-man appeal panel held that the Lagos High Court Ikeja lacked the jurisdiction to entertain the matter in the first place. The panel added that even if its decision on the jurisdiction was wrong, the arrest and detention of Babaswe by the NDLEA was not unreasonable. The court also ruled that the award of 25 million naira as damages in this circumstance was excessive, unrealistic, and perverse. We move to the High Court sitting in Port Harcourt, Rivers State, which last week Friday stopped the People's Democratic Party, PDP, from taking further action against the Rivers State Governor, Rotimi Amechi. The court barred the party from taking further action against Governor Amechi, pending the hearing of a substantive suit is filed to challenge his suspension from the party. Governor Amechi's legal team had filed a preliminary application before the court, presided by Justice Emmanuel Obuji, to challenge his suspension from the PDP by the National Working Committee of the party. After hearing the application, Justice Obuji issued the order barring the party from taking further steps and also directed the PDP to maintain the status quo in the matter until the substantive suit brought by the governor is heard. The court has also summoned the PDP to appear before it on Thursday, the 6th of June, and has directed Governor Amechi's legal team to set the PDP the necessary court processes by pasting them on the walls of the party in Abuja and through publications in 3 national dailies. And we round off in London, where the suspects in the murder of Lee Rigby have been charged before a Westminster magistrate court. 22-year-old Michael Adebowale appeared at the court in handcuffs, wearing a grey-green long-sleeved top and white baggy pants. The injured suspect was permitted to sit during the hearing as the charges against him were read out. Rigby, a soldier with the 2nd Battalion, the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers, was run over and killed in a Woolwich street on the afternoon of Wednesday, the 22nd of May. Adebowale listened without reaction in court as he was charged with Rigby's murder and possession of a firearm. Prosecuting counsel Bentham David has told the court that the charges met the definition of terrorism under Section 30 of the Terrorism Act. The Chief Magistrate, Howard Riddle, has said the matter will be elevated to the Crown Court. He has also fixed bail hearing for Monday at the Old Bailey, and a trial date has been set for the 28th of June. The second suspect, 28 years old Michael Adebolajo, has also been charged for the offense a day after leaving hospital. He will also appear in court on Monday.
You see, life has just got easier. You stay connected to Channels TV, where news and innovations are shaping our world. Simply log on to channelstv.com to get the breaking news. Browse the homepage according to what matters to you. Tap on the extended coverage of business, sports, politics, lifestyle, infotech, entertainment, health, world news, and lots more. Click on the live link and see the news in real time. Do you want to watch the latest video of the day? It's just a click away. Friend us on Facebook, YouTube, follow us on Twitter, Google+, participate in Channels TV poll, and share your comments. It's a website you can talk to. Your voice will be heard.
channelstv.com. The news at your fingertips.
Welcome back. Now, as part of the midterm reports of the present administration, the Minister of Finance, Professor Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, says that the country's GDP has recorded significant growth, with the dollar exchange remaining stable at between 155 naira to 160 naira. The rate of inflation, the minister says, has slowed to 9.1% from 12.4% in May 2011. External reserve, which was $32.08 billion in May 2011, has risen to $48.4 billion in May 2013. External crude account is also up from $4 billion 2 years ago to $16 billion this year. Despite this success story, corruption underdevelopment still greatly plagues the country. Some people say that a lack of consistent enforcement of laws is at the heart of the issue of corruption. My guest, Gbenga Oyebode, has a very interesting perspective. Mr. Oyebode has been the managing partner of the law firm of Aluko & Oyebode since 1993. He heads the firm's corporate and energy practice areas and has significant experience in project finance, corporate law, energy and natural resources, telecommunications, and aviation law. Mr. Oyebode was educated at the University of Ife and the University of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. He was admitted to the Nigerian bar in 1980, and 3 years later, he was also admitted as an attorney at law of the Supreme Court of New York State. Mr. Oyebode is the chairman of Access Bank PLC and Okumu Oil Palm Company PLC, both listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, NSE. He also sits on the Africa Advisory Committee of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, JSE. He joins me on the program now to look at the Nigerian business environment and the role of lawyers in the economy. Now, as the chairman of the NBA section on business law, I want you to do an assessment for us of the business environment in Nigeria. Would you say that it has improved, especially under this administration?
You know, one of the good things about Nigeria is that almost all economies is that business lawyers are always able to feel the tempo of the environment. When foreign investors are coming into a country, the tendency typically is for them to talk to their lawyers to see what the opportunities are, what the challenges are, what the general lay of the land is, so that as good corporate citizens that they comply with all the laws. Even when Nigerians are investing, they talk to their lawyers also about putting the proper structures in place. And what I would say to you is that from what we see over the last, I'd say 5 to 10 years, within the period where we've had the return to democracy in Nigeria, that there's been significant investment across the board. In all the different sectors of the Nigerian economy, and lawyers essentially have benefited from the investments that we're seeing. So for me, I think that what we're looking at is a continuing track record of investments into the future.
Again and again, we're confronted by corruption in the country. In fact, it's become almost cliche to say that corruption is the bane of the Nigerian society, but some people argue that it appears that lawyers are not playing their proper roles in the society, because if you look at it, documents and contracts signed by lawyers are at the heart of these corruption cases. So what would you say to people who finger lawyers where corruption thrives?
I think one of the things that all of us needs to recognize is that lawyers do have a role to play, but that doesn't mean that the legal profession is at the center of the malpractices. I think that what we need to understand is that the enforcement of law is at the very, very heart of the problem. There's a culture that is developing around us where there's a sense that because of the delays in enforcement, because of the delays in the judicial process, because sometimes of poor prosecution, people are getting away with murder. That does not necessarily mean that it's the lawyers who cause the problem. So I tend to see it sometimes as a societal ill. You can't have the legal profession batting at 100% when everything else around you is collapsing. So I think what we do need to recognize is that there is a problem, and all of us should be held responsible, irrespective of whether it is the lawyers, the judicial officers, or the law enforcement agencies. I think we do need to have a level playing field, and we do need to make sure that it's entrenched in our culture, a culture where we say that if people run foul of the law, they will pay. Right now, there are instances that people can point to where some people, there's a tendency that they're getting away with murder. That's totally unsustainable, and we can't allow that to continue.
So it's a question of everybody keying into doing the right thing, not
just the lawyers. I think it's a cultural thing at this point. We've developed into a society where there is a sense that you can actually get away with bad behavior. And that, as I said, that's unsustainable. You look at cultures all over the world, you look at economies all over the world. The economies that today are the fastest growers in the world are economies where people actually, there's a level playing field. You get what you deserve when you invest. You are able to rely on the courts to uphold the contracts. Wherever there's a system where, irrespective of what I say to you about how the economy is growing, where there's a system where there's a sense that you can cheat the other party, then in actual fact what will happen is that foreign investors will take a look at that market and say, well, this may not be a market that we want to invest in because we may not be able to get away, we may not be able to get our day in court. And that's obviously not a good thing.
But does Nigeria have a strong legal framework to drive foreign investment?
I think with most things, and one of the great things about Nigeria is that we have most of the laws in place. So it's enforcement. I tend to tell people that, one of our biggest problems is that sometimes we have too many conferences where we're all talking to each other. But it's execution that is the bane of the Nigerian society at large. So it's not about whether we should make laws. The laws exist on the statute books. Should we tweak some of the laws? The answer is yes. Are some of the laws archaic? The answer is yes. But as a whole, the biggest problem here in this society is execution. It's execution of the laws on the statute books. It's execution by all the different agencies and regulators in place. And it's also about consistent execution, not targeted towards one person as against the other person, a consistent application of laws that are on the statute books. That is what you see in developed economies, and that's what we should advocate for Nigeria.
Business lawyers are considered pace setters, especially in the corporate commercial world. Despite the challenges facing the legal profession, what are the trends that you think will drive change and development in the sector?
What I would say is that it's not about whether necessarily business lawyers are trendsetters. It's about lawyers generally in developed economies being in positions where they can project the good things that we all expect of society. And so if you take a look at, let me use, again, business lawyers as an example. What are the things that lawyers can do to make the investment area more amenable for investors? And at this point, I'm not even talking foreign investors, I'm talking all of us. There are things that we can look at, the whole area of land tenure, for instance. The Land Use Act touches all of us. The fact that there are difficulties in registering title to land, the fact that certain states change their rules ever so often, the fact that there's no certainty in title, the fact that you can drive around the country today and the only way that a landowner, even in the most developed parts of Nigeria, Lagos, where a landowner, the only way he protects his title is that he paints on the wall, beware of 419.
Buyers beware.
Thank you. That is almost unimaginable in a developed economy. That the only way you will be able to say to a potential purchaser or a potential tenant that he should not talk to anybody that brings him to look at a piece of property is to paint it on the wall of the house. It's almost something from the Middle Ages.
That's like resorting to self-help.
Exactly. And I think that our role as legal practitioners is to make sure that regulatory behavior follows trends. There are global trends around the world. There are particular states that have invested significantly in technology to protect land tenure. Lagos is one of those states. The Federal Capital Territory is one of those areas. And I think that once we recognize that a city like Lagos with 15 to 20 million people cannot be driven purely on a manual way of behavior. So what's the role of lawyers? Our role is essentially to engage regulators in how we can have proper behavior, engage our clients in how we cannot engage in anything but a proper way of doing things. And what you will see in some of the positions that the Nigerian Bar Association and the current national executive led by Okewali, some of the positions that you've seen that they have taken is positions that say that ethical behavior is paramount. And so if we can cure some of the ills within our profession, then it stands us in good stead in actual fact, for clients and the public at large to take a second look at the behavior of lawyers.
But are lawyers playing the role they should play in the economy?
I think that we are playing the role. Is that an across-the-board behavior? The answer is no. Can we do much better? The answer is yes. And I think that you will see both from the Nigerian Bar Association's disciplinary processes and some of the very, very anti-corrupt behavior or policies that have been put in place by the current Chief Justice of the Federation. What you will see there is that there is a need. I mean, first there's a realization that things are not right. We recognize that, again, just as you referred to, people tend to think that lawyers are behind some of these things. And so we first need to clean up our act in the sense of trying to change perception and behavior about lawyers. And I think that we are getting there. But do we still have a lot of work to do? The answer is yes. We must make sure. For instance, the section of business law, one of our key cardinal things that we look at is continuing legal education. Why? Because we think that it's a poor job if you graduate from the Nigerian law school, but the only training you get is on the job. And 20 years after, you've never gone to a refresher program, you haven't attended any courses, you haven't even learnt about new amendments to law or new laws. So that has to be one of the key items that push changes in behavior. And that's one of the reasons why the SBL, even from when George Etomi was chairman of the SBL, it's one of the reasons why our conferences and our committee sessions are critical in our view of changing behavior, making sure that people step up to the plate, making sure that people keep on top of their game, and making sure that they represent their clients appropriately.
Now, you've talked about continuing legal education, but apart from continuing legal education, what's the SBL doing to improve the contribution of lawyers to the economy?
A lot of different things, but I'll hit a couple of key ones. As I've said, continuing legal education through our conferences, making sure that we engage young lawyers. We have a very robust young lawyers forum. And our view is that we must use the Young Lawyers Forum to engage lawyers. One of the concerns I typically have is people go to law school almost as a right, but it's a rite of passage. So a good percentage of people who go to the Nigerian law school do not end up practicing law. They think of it as a degree that they should. And so one of the things that is important to us is to make sure that young lawyers see the profession for what, don't see the negatives in the profession. And where there are negatives, that we reduce those negatives to the barest minimum. We also think that it's important for lawyers to participate in corporate social responsibility. A situation where only the corporates are socially responsible cannot be allowed to continue. Because again, the general public want to feel a sense of belonging. We live in a world today of CSR, and as the profession, the profession cannot stand aside from what's happening around it, whether it is in providing healthcare for our people, whether it is in making sure that we sponsor and donate to the less privileged in our societies. That's one of the things that the SBL stands for. A situation where we will provide free clinics to people who need legal advice. We will make sure that our lawyers step up to the plate and provide the right legal advice. For me, if we're able to achieve that as the SBL, and all of these things fall within the realm of the activities of the Nigerian Bar Association itself, but the sections tend to have an ability to reach a bit deeper within society, and that's why the life and blood, for instance, of the sections, at least of the section of business law, is the committee structures, and the committees are represented in all the different states of the federation and at all the different levels, and we tend to have all the branches, and we tend to have interventions at those levels.
So how does the SBL go about choosing its themes for the conferences?
Well, I think one of the key things for us, last year we were talking about global standards. And why did we focus on global standards? Because there's a sense sometimes within our society that what's happening around the world is not important for us. Well, the reality is that it's important. When you take a look at economic activity and economic behavior, most other successful nations and developed economies have been through the cycle where we are. So one of the great things is that you must learn from the mistakes that others have made. Nations like China or India, people tend to say to me that Nigeria is where India was 20 years ago. So obviously, the things that happen in India are perfect for us from a legal perspective to learn from. Why? Because India has, from a population perspective, the same sort of numbers from a population growth view. They have a common law jurisdiction where people have been studying and reading law in England for over 100 years. Those kind of things are the things that we should learn from. So we had a global standards conference last year. This year, the theme of the conference is law in an emerging market. So what's the role of lawyers in an emerging market? Again, why do we have that sort of theme? The view that we take is emerging markets. We typeset emerging markets across the country, across the world, the BRICS economies. What is significant about them is that all of them are at a cusp where they will become first world countries very soon. We need to learn from them and to learn from what's the role of lawyers in these economies. It's not rocket science, but we can't do it by ourselves without actually taking a look at the trends, global trends, but global trends maybe not in the Western world. So we're not saying we would like and there's nothing altogether bad about typesetting Western economies like the United States or in Europe. But we also want to say to ourselves, what's happened in Brazil? What happened in China? What happened in India? What happened in South Africa? What are the key developments in these countries that we can borrow from to make things exactly.
And make better.
Exactly. And so this year, that's the theme. And we've had a good group of foreign lawyers that we've invited. The keynote speaker at our conference is Harold Paisner, who's senior partner at BLP in the United Kingdom. He's chair of the Law Society's International Committee. His firm has significant practice across the world. And so what do we want to take from that kind of keynote speaker? It is to understand how the economies that they have set up offices in, that they've invested in, how those emerging economies have developed, at least from the legal perspective. So those are the kind of themes that we tend to look at. And the perspective we take is that if we learn from that, then obviously we're laying proper foundations here. But it is critical that we understand that Nigeria is not isolated from the Committee of Nations, that developments that happen in the Western world and in emerging markets like ours, that we should borrow from them, we should learn from them, we should try and institutionalize some of them. Obviously, we're not going to take everything hook, line, and sinker, but we must understand that we are not isolated from these developments.
Ethical behavior is paramount. There's a proper way to do things, and consistent enforcement of laws will go a long way in addressing the challenges that face us as a nation. Very compelling submission, but this is where we adjourn proceedings for today. By all means, let's continue the discussion via Facebook, email, or Twitter. And if you missed any part of the program, you can watch again via YouTube/channelsweb. I'm Shola Soyele. Thank you.